In this video, we'll set up a fluid sim, pump loads of particles in, and then we'll show you how we can stop this pressure build by using the check density options. This can be tweaked to get maximum particles in the sim without that explosive pressure. In our scene, we have this very basic fluid solve going on here. We've got this container collision geometry, we've got a gravity in the defaults, and we've got an nxFluid. This is entirely in the default settings, and we're getting this fluid look. So what we're going to do is just have a quick look at our emitter. If we go to the XP emitter emission tab, we've got this spherical emission shape, and we have this random emission, which is rate, and that means that particles are randomly born within the volume of our spherical emitter, and we've got 2000 per second being born, and they have no speed, and that's giving us this look. And we've got this steady stream of particles. The problem is, if we want to pump more particles into this, let's just say we put our birth rate up to 10,000 per second, hit play, and we're going to see that we're getting this kind of, it looks cool, but we've got this explosiveness. We've lost that stream of particles. And this is actually happening because the fluid solver is solving very well, is doing what it should. And the reason we've got this kind of explosive pushing apart of our fluid stream is to do with the fluid density value and how that's calculated and how it affects the fluid solve. Now, the basic rule is this: if you have loads of particles in a volume, they will have a higher fluid density than far fewer particles in the same volume. They will have a lower fluid density value. When you've got high fluid density values, it creates a pressure force and it pushes those particles apart. And that's what our fluid solver is doing here. And the reason it's doing it is because if we just switch the fluids off for a second and just dolly in a bit, if we go to the first frame, we get our first load of particles born. Gravity will start pulling these down, but on the second frame, our next load of particles are born. And look, only these particles here have moved outside of that spherical emitter. So we've got double the amount of particles on the second frame. So obviously the fluid density value has gone up markedly because we've got loads more fluid particles crammed in this same space. If we go to the next frame, even more and even more. So as the fluid solver starts working, of course, because we're pumping those particles in, it's increasing their fluid density and it's creating a pressure which is pushing them all apart like this. So how do we pump more particles into our scene and avoid this look if it is not what you desire? Well, there's a setting that is going to help us out for this. Let's go to our nxFluids and we'll go to we're in SPH solver mode, which is the default. And in SPH mode, there is a setting called check density, and this is what's going to help us. So if we activate check density, just leave it on the defaults at 110% and hit play, you'll see that explosiveness has disappeared. We now have this stream of particles. Because what is happening is, as the particles are born, it checks the density of those fluid particles. And if they are over 110%, it will kill off that particle. And so it prevents that problem of having loads of fluid particles packed into a very small amount of space, which is creating that pressure in the first place. The disadvantage with this is that it's killing some of the particles off to get the sim to work. So that means that if we go to our emitter emission, we're not actually getting this full 10,000 particles per second number because some of them are being killed off because their fluid density is too high. If we go to our nxFluids, we can increase this max density, which will the killing process will be less severe. It'll only kill them off now if their max density is over 130%. So it's going to allow more particles in. So let's see if we've got more particles in the scene. Our stream has just widened slightly, and that's because it's letting more particles through. So there's still some of that pressure force being generated. Let's put this up to say 160. You see it widened slightly, but we got significantly more particles in. And now on this number, we're actually filling up our tank far more quickly. Let's creep this up to say, if we put it on 200, you'll really start, yeah, look. So now it's allowing loads more in, but it is creating that pressure force again and pushing out our particle stream. So you can play around with the max density value until you've kind of confined that to the look that you want. Let's go with 130 for me, so we still get this nice stream. And there we go. So now we're able to pump as many particles as possible into this scene without it creating that pressure which was spoiling our particle stream as we were filling up our container. And just so you know, if you are using the nxFluids in PBD mode, which is a different solver, but it also has a check density option. Let's just reset that to the default of 110. So on the PBD, we set that simulating. We've got our check density working in the same way. If we switch off that check density and hit play, again, we're getting that similar explosive force. It's the same, it's a different solver, but it's the same principle. Loads of particles being borne on top of each other creates a high fluid density situation, creates pressure and forces them apart. But it can be mitigated by checking the density, which kills off any particles with too high a density, making the sim way more stable.